So let's bring in our guest.
You have the next slide. You have the next, okay. There's a poet in Colorado. And his name is Abeyta. And Aaron wrote a poem called 13 Ways of Looking at a Tortilla. Now, I would read, if I were doing this in class, I would probably read it first so that the students would be fully, I would dramatize how well he reads it and not how well I read it, because I think this is one where his voice makes a big difference. But anyway, we asked him to read this poem and to talk about why he wrote 13 Ways of Looking at a Tortilla. So we have a little interview with him here that we'd like you to listen to. It's very short, but he talks about Stevens and then he reads his poem. You'll hear me asking him some questions as part of it. Let's hit the button here.
Thank you so much for being with us. And the first thing I'm going to ask you is, do you like Wallace Stevens?
Yeah, he's one of my literary heroes. I think one of the very first poems I ever fell in love with was Idea of Order at Key West. And I will admit, I don't necessarily understand him, but I don't think he's necessarily meant to be understood in some instances. I think he's a difficult poet, but I admire the way that he uses language. I admire the way that he can evoke feeling, and just the rhythms of his poetry is mesmerizing, at least to me it is.
So how did you write 13 Ways of Looking at a Tortilla?
Well, it's a very long story, but I'll give you the shortest version possible. And it was an assignment for a master's class when I was getting my MFA at Colorado State. And the assignment was to model a poem. And I was trying to model many other poems, all of which I've forgotten. For whatever reason, I was reminded of an earlier poem I had written where I had included the name Ramon Fernandez. Of course, I talked about Idea of Order at Key West a little while ago. So anyway, I started looking through Wallace Stevens. I found 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird. And I thought, well, I'm gonna try and make that line, but still be true to him. I don't want to. I want it to be like an homage to him. At the same time, I want to make it completely my own. So that's where the tortilla replaced the blackbird, and that's where New Mexico replaced Connecticut, and that's where the Spanish replaced some of the more, shall we call it, high language of the Stevens poem. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. Would you mind reading your poem?
No, I don't mind at all. 13 Ways of Looking at a Tortilla. 1. Among 20 different tortillas, the only thing moving was the mouth of the niño. 2. I was of 3 cultures, like a tortilla, for which there are 3 bolillos. 3. The tortilla grew on a wooden table. It was a small part of the earth. 4. A house and a tortilla are one. A man, a woman, and a tortilla are one. 5. I do not know which to prefer, the beauty of the red wall or the beauty of the green wall, the tortilla fresh or just after. 6. Tortillas fill the small kitchen with ancient shadows, the shadow of Maclovia cooking long ago. The tortilla rolled from the shadow, the innate roundness. 7. Oh, thin viejos of Chimayo, why do you imagine biscuits? Do you not see how the tortilla lives with the hands of the women about you? 8. I know soft corn and beautiful, inescapable sopapillas, but I know too that the tortilla has taught me what I know. 9. When the tortilla is gone, it marks the end of one of many tortillas. 10. At the sight of tortillas browning on a black comal, even the pachucos of Española would cry out sharply. 11. He rode over New Mexico in a pearl lowrider. Once he got a flat. In that, he mistook the shadow of his spare for a tortilla. 12. The abuelitas are moving. The tortilla must be baking. 13. It was Cinco de Mayo all year. It was warm, and it was going to get warmer. The tortilla tortilla sat on the frijolito plate.
You can see that what Aaron has done there is really to, as he says, it's both an homage to Wallace Stevens, and I think that's where we begin, and it is also it's also a playful poem. As he said, he's done his own. He wanted to put enough of himself in there, as well as pay tribute to Wallace Stevens. And I think that's the first thing that we talk about with talkbacks.
Nicole, could you flip to the next slide, please? Great. So here's the poem if you'd like to take a look at it. It was wonderful hearing Aaron read it out loud, of course, and especially the untranslated Spanish, which is really quite terrific. And for me, every time I look at his poem, I feel like I understand the Wallace Stevens poem a little bit better. He kind of guides me in some ways, and maybe it's just because it's a little lighter and it's a little bit more humorous, but I find that the images are very similar, and so are the themes.
That's exactly what we hope. I mean, what Robin said is exactly what we want to happen, which is that you understand the Wallace Stevens poem a little bit better because you've looked at this one. Now, imagine had you been the one who wrote this poem, how much you would have had to understand Wallace Stevens in order for that to work. So that's really the first way that we want to think about the talkbacks. And also, Aaron reminds us that we all know that a really important way that we have talkbacks is that we reverse that subject-object position. Perhaps the most famous one, or at least in the most of us have taught, would be Jane Eyre and Wide Sargasso Sea. Because there you have Jane Eyre with Bertha in the attic, and then when you end up in Wide Sargasso Sea, you flip it and you get the perspective of Bertha, so that you get a different voice. And that really is where that concept of the talk back comes in. Again, sometimes it is an homage, it's a tribute, but at the same time, it can also be a bit of a protest, and that really segues into our next one.
But before we go, Nicole, could you just flip to the next slide? We have a couple of questions here that you might want to bring to your class to address not the comparison contrast, because we don't think that that's what the purpose of these are, but just ways to open the discussion, maybe to provide writing assignments. And so these were just a set of questions that we suggest. So one would be, besides the subject, what's the biggest difference between the two poems? And I think answers will vary here. Abeyta's purpose, homage or satire, or a combination. And we think you could make an argument for any one of those, homage, satire, or a combination. The effect of the two locations, Connecticut and Chimayo. And then number 4, which is the activity we suggest, to have your students write their own version of a poem that looks at a familiar object 13 different ways. I know years ago there was one in the New Yorker, 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackberry. That's a little dated now, but it's quite charming if you can find it. But I'm sure your students might have fun with 13 Ways of Looking at an iPhone, for example. But now we're going to move to a set of texts, one a visual and one a poem that really have a little bit more depth of analysis available for us now.